In my art class, I was looking for an alternative drawing media for my drawing students. I discovered the wood burning pens and realized that students could learn to draw with fire. Many drawing techniques such as stippling, hatching, and cross-hatching can be achieved with the wood burning pen. I'm just using a 1/4 inch plywood for this wood burning demo. I picked a photo to transfer onto the plywood. I trimmed the photo to fit and then used carbon paper to transfer and trace the image onto the wood. Trim the carbon paper to fit the image and then tape it down on the board so that it doesn't move or slide while you're trying to trace over it. When you're tracing, it's important to take your time and trace very slowly over all the details of the image that you want to reproduce. I like to use a colored ink pen when I'm tracing over these photocopies because it's hard to see pencil lines. If I use a colored ink pen, I can see where I've traced. Once I'm done tracing, I peek by lifting a little bit of tape off of the paper to make sure I didn't miss any spots. Then you remove the paper and you will have your image transferred to the wood. I have chosen to use a wood burning pen that I purchased off of Amazon for $14.95. It says Creative Wood Burner on it. I believe it's made by a company called Walnut Hollow. I've been using these wood burners in my classroom. They seem to be pretty durable. Another thing you're going to need is some kind of metal tray to put the tips from the wood burner in because they get very hot and you want to exchange them or remove them. I'll be showing you several different pieces that I've done and that my students have done throughout the video. First thing to do is to know how to remove the tip. As you're working, the tips are going to get hot. You're going to want to change them. So I use a pair of pliers to change them, and I make sure that I unplug the wood burner, hold the bit in place, and just turn to remove and to put the tips on. Once your image is transferred to the wood, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to do the outline. But before you can do any outlining, you need to practice with the wood burner. I always have students take and practice on the back of their piece with different types of lines and different types of tips. Some of the tips shade, some of the tips do fine lines, and some of the tips are made to do stippling or dots. Practice with the tips and find the tips that you feel more comfortable working with. It is important when you first start wood burning to press very lightly on the tip. The lighter you press, the lighter the line. The harder you press, the darker the line. So think of it as a pencil. Another thing about wood burning is working with and against the grain. Sometimes I have to turn the wood to be able to get at the right angle when I notice that the grain of the wood has changed. One of the greatest things about wood burning is how you can recreate all kinds of different textures. You can see in this photo done by one of my students that the student was able to achieve lots of different hair texture and darks and light values. This is a picture I have of a horse that I'm doing that is a little bit further along than the bird. In a moment I'm going to be showing you guys how to start shading after the outlining. It's important to get the outline done first, and then I work from the reference photo to be able to see where the values and the contrasts are so that I know what values to work with. Once I get the outline done, I prefer to start with all of the dark areas of value and then work into the light and medium values. I'm going to go back to showing you the image of the cat. Notice with this image, there's a lot of different drawing techniques done, from cross-hatching to hatching to stippling to create the different textures. This tip is the shading tip. It's a flat spade-like tip. It should be used to just hover lightly above the wood, and you're going to see how quickly it will change the color of the wood to a almost golden brown. If I press down firmer, it's going to be darker. But I use it just like a pencil again and try to create the values in the line quality and the direction of the photo that I'm looking at. If the tip gets too hot, it will start to smoke. And periodically, you're going to want to take the tip and wipe it off with a piece of damp paper towel because there will be some resin from the wood that builds up on the tips. That resin kind of stops the tip from burning adequately. Once your wood burning project is done, it's fun to experiment with different colored medias to create color onto the wood. I've tried color pencils, watercolors, and pastels. All seem to achieve different effects in colorizing or tinting the wood. One of the things you have to be careful when using any of the watercolors is that the paint will bleed, so that you want to be careful with paints and too much water on the wood. I have chosen to use watercolor for the background behind this horse. I first start with a very diluted blue just to see if I like the color. Then I start to add in more pure pigment on top of it. As I'm brushing, I brush away from the burned design because I don't want the watercolor to bleed or follow the grain of the wood into the horse's face. Wood burning is a relatively fun and easy craft to learn to do. I'm hoping through my tutorial that students will learn how to use the textural methods of drawing in this new media.